Alrighty. We are live. So, just going to hang out here for a minute, let some folks file in. Looking forward to seeing some folks over here in the old comment section. We're going to get cracking here in just a few minutes to start talking about some of the comments on the 7 levels videos that I've done, since that seems to be what everybody favored in the poll is a good idea for a stream. Zed Wren, what's up? Thanks for stopping by. Somebody go slap Dunder Moose because I don't think he had actually scheduled his stream all that far out. Hope you're doing pretty good this evening. Let's see here. Thank you, StreamYard, for four of you out there. Joel, can't stick around, but at least you're here, man. I'm glad to have you stop on by. Hopefully you get to at least stick around for some of the engagement here. Like I said, I think I'm going to give it 4 or 5 minutes here just to let some folks file in, let things kind of get kicking. Stat blocks and math crunching, huh? What you working on there, man? You putting together something, I don't know, something 5e, something Shadow Dark? What you got going on? So, let's see here. Man, we got people just dying to be on a comment stream here. You got to love it. Make a video 16 minutes about everything in the universe that's going on, tabletop role-playing game-wise. You use an example to show how certain people like to manipulate the definitions of words, change things, co-op stuff, let them take on a life of their own. In this case, trying to basically steal the word tourist. And boy, do you set off some idiots who make some obtuse and just ignorant arguments trying to, fuss about what a word means to them, and, digging back and saying, oh man, 100 years ago, this is what it meant. It's like, well, 100 years ago, if I called you a piece of firewood, I mean, if I drop the old fag bomb, ain't nobody here thinks I'm talking about a cigarette anymore. So what it used to mean doesn't matter anymore. But that's okay. Like I said, there's a masturbatory practice to go off in the comment section. Let's see here. Murder Mystery one-off adventure for Pathfinder 1E. Come on, man. Graduate. Just go play 3.5. It's better. Like a lot better. Pathfinder 1E is like, it's kind of like owning an Apple computer. Pathfinder First Edition is like 3.5 with training wheels that you can't take off. But Murder Mystery one-off adventure. What kind of level are you looking at there? We talking a low level, so we're not even having to deal with a lot of the speak to dead and that sort of thing? Or are we talking a higher level adventure where you're actually having to deal with people talking to level 6, huh? No, that shouldn't be too difficult. You don't think you're going to run into too much at level 6 that would screw it up. Though if you use things like speak to dead wisely, you can really mess the players up and get them real turned around when they're trying to figure out the mystery. Depending on how you play that sort of thing. I usually play speak to dead and stuff like that, as it depends on how much the players are trying to push it to get information on whether or not the undead or the dead person they're talking to is truly, they may have to give you an honest answer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the truth that they give you is the whole truth or the truth that you really need to figure something out. So you can really kind of do some misdirects. Especially if you got this kind of situation where they're very reliant on the magic to help them solve the mystery. So plans forward, they bring out that spell on the table. All right, so I'm gonna touch on one thing here just because it's a bugaboo that sticks in my head and pisses me off on a regular basis before we get cracking into the meat of the stream when we're talking about these comments and stuff on the 7 levels videos. And our good old VTuber friend, the abysmal critic, our wonderful horror Morata VTuber, it posted about, you know, Eowyn in Lord of the Rings, particularly in the movie. This idiotic concept going around. It's a meme that often gets that's the, you know, I am no man part of the movie, and these idiots are going around, oh, you know, conservatives would see that the Lord of the Rings, if this was released today, which, you know, is clearly the most idiotic thing you can possibly think of, given how conservative Tolkien was to start with, and the fact that the entire Legendarium is built in and around Catholic principles and very conservative, traditional Catholic principles. I don't know where they get this idea that conservatives have an issue with strong women. They just have an issue with idiotic post-second wave feminism liberation nonsense that's not good for anybody. And we have a problem with, and this isn't even a conservative or a liberal thing, people who like good stories have issues with like girl boss style characters because they're terrible. So that one's kind of an annoying thing with me, though. She said, you know, if it were released today, they'd probably make Eowyn black. And God knows Magic the Gathering already did it to Aragorn, which is all true. But you don't even have to look at that. One of my biggest issues, just like everybody else who is a true hardcore, born, dyed-in-the-wool Tolkien fan, has some issues with the film because there are some changes that had to be made to make it a more digestible for a cinematic audience. And there's other changes that just didn't make sense in a lot of ways. Eowyn's character being one of the big ones is that her character is really just kind of messed up. She was always exactly what she needed to be. She's a strong female character. But they had to make her this weak, pathetic female character in order to give her a strong girl boss moment to get their clap line. And the worst thing they did, and this is the big bugaboo for me, it's a really simple change. It's really small. If you watch the movie, they fight. And, you know, the Witch King comes down. She says, you're going to have to basically go through me to get to Theoden. And he says, don't stand between the Nazgul and the prey. He fights with her. They're fighting back and forth. Her arm is smashed behind the shield. He picks her up by the throat and says she's going to die. And then Mary stabs him in the back of the leg. He falls. And then she pulls off her helmet and says, I am no man, and and stabs him in the face. And you get the big girl boss clap line because, you know, oh man, we pulled one over on you, Witch King. You'd have known, if you'd have just known it was a woman, you'd have been more careful. You know, surprise, it's a woman. I'm no man. And she does it. And here's the problem: is she does that after she's already beaten him, when it doesn't matter anymore. There's no bravery in saying that to somebody who's already been beaten. When you read it in the book the way Tolkien wrote it, the winged beast lands. Theoden's on the ground underneath Snowmane. He's wrecked. He's toast. And the Nazgul, the Witch King, is going to feed him to the winged beast. And all the Rohirrim flee from this powerful Witch King. Eowyn steps up in front and says, you know, you won't touch him. You got to go through me. And at that point, before any fighting starts, he says, no, she says, I will hinder you if I may. And he says, no man can hinder me. Then she pulls off her helmet and says, what stands before you is no man, but a woman. And, you know, I will, basically, she says, jump, Froggy. She calls his bluff right there in front. She's like, you ain't going to intimidate me. I don't give a crap who you are. You aren't getting to him except through me. This is at the beginning when he's full power and he's coming after her. Of course, he's still not afraid of her. And then the same thing kind of plays out. Mary gets him in the back of the knee. She kills him. Witch King dies. They end up in the halls of healing because they're, it's a devastating fight. But that's the big difference, is that in one, this is her standing up against impossible odds and essentially telling this Demon King with all this power, after she cuts his, cuts the winged beast's head off, and flat out says, you are not going to, I don't care who you are, I'm going to stand up here. That is bravery. That is a heroine. When she stands up in front of him and she's like, I know you're going to beat me. I know that I can't stop you, but I'm going to die trying, and you will not get past me while I have breath in my body, because that's what I need to do. And that's that's what matters. I will, if you get to him, it's going to be through me. Standing up in those odds is what makes her a powerful character and what gives her that strength. By moving that one line to the end of that speech, put away all the other damage they did to her character, making her this kind of whiny, insufferable, lovelorn character. Move that aside. Just moving that one line from the beginning of the fight to the end wrecks her character, and does it for one reason and one reason only, so that the modern feminists can stand up and cheer and clap and say, ha ha, yeah, get him, girl. You got him. You traded one of the best heroic moments in the entire trilogy, the entire book, to get a clap line. That's it. And yeah, definitely the Witch King is pretty fantastic. He's awesome. One of the best characters in the Legendarium. Very menacing, even though he really only has that one real scene in the books. But and it's not that the shadow of his Morgul dagger can cause injury. He actually stabs Frodo with the real knife physically in the real world. In the books, you just only see him in the shadow world because they show it in the movie from the perspective of Frodo in the shadow world. And it really, that's actually a good thing in the movie, is that it really hammers across the point that this weapon existed in two worlds. It wasn't just a knife wound, but it also shows that he thinks that far ahead, the Witch King does. He understands the position he's in, and that getting the ring later actually probably a better idea. So actually, good there. And yes, Zed, he's absolutely right. You got plenty of Gary Stews and stuff. Hey, Aelin was not a Mary Sue. Let's make sure that that's out there. He's she was not a Mary Sue. She was completely neutered in the movies. She was a much stronger character front to back in the books. And oh man, Fëanor for Emperor, dude. You can't do Fëanor for Emperor. We love Fëanor. All right, Fëanor's great. He's vastly underrated, and he is probably reviled more than he needs to be. But ironically, discussing with High King Fëanor on X earlier today, I was actually kind of laughing about that, because he was talking about how not only would Fëanor be able to overcome and resist the ring, he'd be able to unmake it. And while there is an argument that he might be able to unmake it, it's like his character, his strength of character pretty much guarantees that he is going to be arrogant to the point of trying to use the ring itself. You can kind of stand on the idea that, Morgoth was not able to fool Fëanor. He never gave in to Morgoth, even though Morgoth really, Melkor came to him and tried to corrupt him and tried to bring him over to his side, tried to give him his gifts and teach him his crafts and stuff. And Fëanor just wasn't having it. He's like, I don't trust you. But I don't think that the ring is so much more subtle, and his character traits are so heavily flawed that I think he'd eventually be corrupted. And to be honest, I think Fingolfin would be too. Ironically, Fingolfin would be because he is too righteous. Fingolfin did a lot of things he shouldn't have done that he did because he had given his word. And he was like, look, this is blood. I've given my word. I have to follow him because I said I would, even when he knew he was doing wrong, and even when he'd been betrayed a few times. So I think actually it's kind of as an ironic twist, even Fingolfin would be corrupted by the ring, though he would at least pick the thing up and immediately start marching towards Mount Doom to destroy it. He probably just wouldn't make it there. One of the core things about the ring that you notice in the book is the ring is far more dangerous to people who have power already. It's one of those things where it's more dangerous if you are more dangerous. The hobbits are uniquely resistant to the ring for a couple of reasons. One is because they don't really have great ambition or great power for the ring to let them look into that kind of space. And the other thing is that their love of a simple life and simple pleasures and just an easy, casual way of being, the ring doesn't really, it's almost like the ring doesn't understand what to give a hobbit in order to corrupt him. That's why it takes so long, is the simple man with the simple pleasure, with the simple, I want to smoke my pipe weed and sit in the garden and eat my cakes and enjoy the summer breeze and have a song at the tavern. It doesn't give the ring a lot for it to glob onto. Whereas like even with like somebody like Aragorn, it can corrupt him by flooding his head with all the great ways he could wield it as the king to bring righteousness to the whole world. And, how he could root out evil in its deepest places with the power of the ring. It can corrupt him that way. Yes, absolutely. Gandalf was 100% aware of that as well. Don't tempt me. Do not tempt me. And perhaps the only powerful being that is not in any way dangerous and in danger by the ring is Tom Bombadil. But Tom Bombadil breaks every single rule there is anyway. I mean, he as a matter of fact, he's actually in the book as he breaks the rules. That's what he does. He's there to break the rules. So I think that's probably enough Tolkien ranting for the to get us started. We got a few of you here in chat. If you're not already, do the like, share, subscribe thing. I'd greatly appreciate it. And we're going to, I guess we're going to go ahead and start cracking on some 7 levels comments here and talk about the 7 levels videos. So the 7 levels concept, I mean, it came to me when I saw the 7 levels of rap skill video, in which case it was just a straight up, no, level 1 basically can't even rhyme. Level 2 is all auto-tune, saying the same word over and over again, pop catchy nonsense, et cetera, et cetera. It's a pretty clear-cut skill progression leading up to at the very end in level 7 having like your Eminems and your Tupacs and your Biggies and stuff who are just exceptional in their skill. And then where I was introduced to it was through the 7 levels of fantasy writer that Daniel Green did. And obviously, when you start talking about 7 levels of fantasy or 7 levels of fantasy writer, it has to go beyond something as simple as the skill level. There's going to inherently be more bias in it because you can start with some skills. All right. You can kind of look at a certain skill level as a barometer. Because, I mean, clearly, if you're a garbage writer, you're going to be a garbage writer. And if you're a really good writer, even if fantasy is not really your thing and you don't grasp some of the concepts, you're still going to be a higher level just based on dent of your wordsmanship and your ability to craft language. But it's really going to have a lot more what you might call meta information. And that got me thinking about tabletop role-playing games and using these 7 levels concept. Where I think I may have gone wrong in some cases, and we'll see this in some of the comments, is I think, some in-game examples or some well-known examples to try and give an idea. But unfortunately, it starts to drag people into fixating on certain things. Yes. 7 levels and making 7 levels list. I'm going to that may be something I have to do. I'm not sure if that's the best idea in the world for my channel, but maybe I should do that. Maybe that we'll keep that in the back for like April Fools or something. Whenever I've got a few more of these. And so we're actually going to start with 7 levels of TTRPGs. We're going to start with the original, the first video. But because that actually kind of highlights what I was just talking about, where I think I made a little bit of a mistake, because I talk about story gaming or narrative gaming or something like that, and talking about like a storyteller type game master. And depending on which way your own biases go, you would think it's, oh, was he trashing everybody who has any kind of narrative concept, or was he here again saying that the adventure gamer and the gold for XP guys and the random table folks and no prep dudes are all at the very bottom just because they don't tell stories or anything like that. And that's not really the case. I generally wanted to point out, like I'd say I was taking a narrative game master, because it's something that you can kind of understand and get your teeth into. It can show you the proclivities or the tendency that they would have to fall into a certain level. And we'll see this in the 7 levels of TTRPGs. You look at it, and there are very rules-light games that could very well be your level 6, level 7 games. Just like there are very crunchy and well-crafted games that can very easily fall into much lower levels. Not to throw shade at old Sandy Peterson here, but I would honestly say like RuneQuest probably belongs in a lower tier. Not like a 1 or a 2, obviously, but like a 3, 4, somewhere in there. Same thing with Shadowrun. These are very well crafted, very well balanced, very well thought out games with tons of mechanics for everything, but they're also both miss a lot of the points where there's some things that should be abstract, and there's some things that should be more precise based on the game you're playing in order to deliver the kind of excitement you need in combat, or deliver the kind of narrative depth you need in a mystery or something like that, depending on what you're trying to set up. And like, for instance, I've used this example talking about combat before. If you want to get right down to it, to resolve a single attack is probably a minimum of a dozen opposed rolls. Where is my weight centered? In what direction am I moving? How is my footing? How is my position? Is my parry 2 inches too far to the right or to the left? What type of weapon am I using versus what type of weapon? What's the skill? Has this guy been hit yet? All these things need to be factored in, and you can make it super realistic. Does this punch land? How much damage does it do? How much, does this thrust kill you, or whatever the case may be? But you just made a single action, a single exchange in combat probably take 30 minutes at the table to figure out. And that's dull and boring. Combat needs to be fast and chaotic. So abstract the hell out of it. If you can make combat 1 roll, make it 1 roll. Because it needs to be fast and gritty and dirty and a little lost in the chaos to give you that feeling. And you have games like RuneQuest or, Shadowrun, where a lot of that gets dragged out a bit because of how much gets into it. And then the same thing can happen in reverse, where you need more, like in some social interactions and stuff. If you really need to have mechanics for that, here's a great example. You look at 3.5 and you're like, all right, I got Intimidate. But Intimidate's charisma or Intimidate's strength. And it doesn't really make sense. I'm trying to intimidate somebody, but there's a lot of ways to do it. I don't necessarily need to be big and brawny. So we're strength, or, I believe it's actually charisma. So you're telling me my 7 foot tall, scarred up, axe wielding, frothing at the mouth, damn near crazy, chaotic or chieftain is terrible because it can't intimidate anybody. Like, you can't take candy from a baby without swinging that axe because his charisma's low. So if you're abstracting those social interactions too much, the only reason you should ever do that if that's not a strong focus of your game. That's why you go into things like Call of Cthulhu, where you have probably 20 different skills that can all be applied to the same task of trying to convince this person to give me something. I can intimidate, I can fast talk, I can use psychoanalysis, I can use diplomacy, I can use like bribery or something like that. I've got different skills for each one of them because that's more of a narrative focused game. So when I did the 7 levels, in a lot of cases, I would use an abstraction. I'd use a shorthand to throw out what I was thinking about what belonged in a certain level. And it would kind of blow up in my face because somebody in my comments would be like, oh, I don't think this should be down there because of this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, I wasn't really saying that. I was just giving you an example of how something done poorly might land in a lower tier. So we're going to get cracking on that here right now. Let me get a couple of these comments here, and then we'll pull up the first video's comments. Let's see here. I have to factor in the goal of the game designer in judging this. RuneQuest unashamedly trades ease of play for more realism and succeeds to that some degree. It absolutely does. But what kind of realism? The mechanical realism of truly determining who's going to land a punch, or the realism of how combat feels when you're in that situation? I have over 40 full contact fights to my name and over a dozen of them professional. And I can tell you right now, the time in that round takes forever. The time sitting in that corner takes nothing. You're like, what, my minute's over? And it's a blur. You don't remember what happened. You go back and you watch it on tape and you're like, I don't remember doing that. Wow, man, he knocked the crap out of me there. It's like, how am I still standing after that? And I didn't think he'd hit me that hard. He clearly he did. Which realization is the question there? 5EDM mentoring, advising the on the fluff side of things, has frustrations, challenging players sometimes, tips scaled, balances tipped. Yeah, I mean, 5th edition is super heroic fantasy. You got to remember that. Even if you use all of the variant rules to make it grittier and tougher, it's a little tough. So you're gonna have to pay attention to it. You're gonna have to do some tweaking there to get him that, if that's what he wants. All right, so let's pull this up. Somebody tell me here. I'm gonna use that. Is that can you guys read that pretty well? Is that or is that super blurry? Because I can flip over here to the actual screen I'm sharing and read it relatively easy, but I don't know if you guys can read that. Is it tiny? Well, maybe I should have gone in and started pulling these things out. Let's see here. I think that's about as big as I can make it right there. Wonder if I do. Not sure I want to. How's that? Is that better, or is it blurry, or looks a little better on my side, but you guys tell me. I zoomed in, which means it's going to be fun navigating this side over here, but does that make it a little better for you guys? I definitely don't want to go pull it up on YouTube and try and scroll in there, because next thing you know, I'm going to be having YouTube video blaring over here and we'll get a copyright claim from myself. So let's see what we can do here. So we're talking with in the 7 levels, video here. Will GM for food, personally thinks that Traveler fits squarely in 6 or 7, particularly in respect to the system and sector creation and the fact that it, had the life path character creation, which it, if I'm not mistaken, is the first one that really did that. You always like you could die in there. You can see my response, I tend to think it belongs in, 6 or 7, but, probably in 6, and that, Call of Cthulhu has a really good argument to be in 7. The thing about 7, and this was one of the big things about level 7. First, let me give you a little bit of an additional breakdown. I just realized that the thumbnail on that says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Wow, how'd I mess that up? I might have to go back and fix that. So, one of the big things that happens with these levels, the way I set them up, I took 1 and 2 tend to be like almost like they're failed experiments, or they're unusable in a lot of ways. Basically, your 1 and 2 is going to be more or less your objective bad, needs to be fixed to really be usable, regardless of what the level is, what the subject of the video is. Your 3 and 4 is going to be where things are basically a good framework, a good basis. This is going to be a foundation you can build off of. You're going to have a lot of people who stay in 3 and 4, and regardless of what it is. For instance, here in the levels of TTRPGs, you're going to have a lot of 3, 4, and 5, but especially 3 and 4. You're going to have a lot of games that fall in those levels. Many of them are not going to be successful because it's going to be, this is D&D, but it's not as good at being D&D. This is supposed to be Call of Cthulhu, but it's not as good at being Call of Cthulhu. It's got, maybe it's an idea that you tried to put out there that didn't work the way you wanted it to. So that's 3 and 4. 5 and 6 is when you start to get into the ones that are truly, almost praiseworthy. So to use a different video as an example on the GM side, your 5 and 6 GMs are the guys who are going to be able to run the game for just about anybody. Like even level 5, that's going to be a lot of GMs who have experience, who are sitting with a crew that they've been playing with for a while, that have the knowledge and have been through the situation. So they've kind of got a Rolodex of rulings and stuff in the back of their head, that sort of thing. And then 6, of course, you're starting to get up there. Level 7. So basically, if you're 5 or 6, you're pretty much peak. And a place I think you can see this is a lot of commenters when they were talking about their abilities as a game master, almost none of them would step up with the hubris to say they were a level 7 game master. Almost every one of them, I think I'm probably a 5 or a 6. And that's 5 or 6 behavior, because 5 or 6 behavior is still going to be, I've got room to improve. But 5 or 6 is pretty much top of cream of the crop. Level 7 is reserved for truly special things. When you think about staying on theme with my channel here, when I think about cars, when you get to level 7, you're talking about things like the Ferrari F40, the Ferrari 250 GTO, the McLaren F1. You're talking about the new ZL1 Corvette. You are talking about, a 396 5% nickel block Z28 Camaro 69 model. You're talking about, not even that, you're talking about like a Copo 427 small block, Camaro Super Camaro that they made like 100 of. When you're talking level 7, you are talking about the pinnacle of what it is. You're not talking about just really, really great stuff. So a Ferrari 298 that just came out, which is a phenomenal car, or a Ferrari F430 or something like that, is going to beat a 250 GTO in every level, but it didn't define things like the 250 GTO did. It's not the most expensive car in the world. The Ford GT40 that the Ford versus Ferrari movie talks about is centered around, that is a car that would be a level 7 car, because there's only one GT40. Not one actual physical car, but like that vehicle stands alone in what it did in history. And that's kind of what you do with when we were getting into level 7 of the D&D games, like level 7 of the TTRPGs. I reserved that for Dungeons and Dragons AD&D, the AD&D first edition. I did get some argument about that. We'll see that here in a second about OD&D. I reserved that. I think Call of Cthulhu has a really strong case to be level 7, because level 7 is the games that defined genres, that changed the course, that made massive impact on their own, and really not just massive impact, not necessarily just financial or a commercial success impact, but made an impact on how we play the games and brought new enduring concepts into the space. And you just really can't, it doesn't matter how good your game is, just being a piece of artistic perfection is not enough to make you level 7 in any of these, really, but especially not in like the design philosophy here. So let's see here. Matter of fact, there is a comment here that I want to get right to here. Well, there's one right there. We give AD&D a 10. It's like, I mean, a 7 is basically where, 10 belongs. More examples for accuracy. There are none for level 1 and 2. They exist to say story games bad. This right here is an example. As you can see, I had a rather lengthy exchange here. I don't really think old Paul here wanted to actually hear what I was saying. Even coming back down, I think we're communicating here, but it's just regurgitated stuff about story games without a single example, et cetera, et cetera. And then some argument back and forth a little bit about OD&D. It's like I said, I don't think he really wanted to listen to me. He was too busy hanging up on certain things, like, and there's a reason there's not a lot of examples for level 1. I you see that there, old subtle citizen hopping in here, like Blade Runner to find Cyberpunk. I mean, it kind of did. I mean, it's not Neuromancer, but Neuromancer, Snow Crash. Blade Runner, definitely. Those are really things that brought that really brought cyberpunk to the public consciousness. But you can see here, well, why aren't there so many examples for level 1 or 2? I can throw that to you guys in the chat. You want to give me some examples of level 1 and 2 games? It's going to be really hard for you to do, because there's really about the only level 1 and 2 examples that you could give for games here in particular is that level 1 and 2 is almost unplayably bad in a lot of cases, which means those games don't see a lot of distribution. You don't really even hear about them. They just disappear. I try not to do too much trashing on smaller indie creators, and I really try not to bring this twerp up anyway, just because I don't think it's productive. But I did mention the Neo TTRPG system that Condor DM made as a level 2 game, I believe. And that's because his game was incomplete and not well play tested and poorly presented, and it hit all those hallmarks. It's basically unplayable as it was presented at the time. I think he has cleaned it up a little bit, but I still would think it's probably a level 2 game. And when I say these story games and the storytelling games, this is not talking about narrative game masters. This is talking about, like, I would say Candela Obscura probably belongs in those really low tiers because it's not even really a game. It is a framework to facilitate an improv session. It may be relatively decent for that, but for playing it as a tabletop role-playing game, it does not provide the framework for growth, for development, for exploration. It doesn't do it. And when I say story games, I kind of tap into my inner RPG pundit here. We're looking back to the Ron Edwards Forge kind of stuff where the rules basically didn't matter, were super skinned back, and the entire idea was to manipulate everything to work to a plot. And I'm going to tell you right now, I can run a game like that and you'll love it. If you want to sit down and play with me and play basically I'll make the rules up on the spot and we'll just do a role-playing story game. Yeah, it'll be great. But that's because I'm a storyteller and a world builder by nature. It's something that I have a lot of practice doing, and I've got years and years of experience to draw on. But I have a player, and she's great. She's a good player, and she's a good friend of mine. If I told her to run that, you could give her every book on the planet. She'd never be able to do it because her brain doesn't work that way. She'd stumble and fumble all over the place. And all a game like that would do is lead her to some very boring and very unproductive and unfun sessions because they're not games. Come on, man. Believe it or not, for whatever reason, I decided to check on old Condor a little while back. He actually did a video not too long ago where he systematically went through all the things he gets made fun of for. And he talked about the door and cleaning it and the painting and why the landlord won't fix it and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, he literally addressed the door for probably 30 seconds to a minute. It is, but no, he hasn't cleaned or painted it yet. Yeah, you can't really think of a game that is a straight up 1. And that's because it's going to be hard. And, almost any level 1 game with furries as characters. I'm sure there's probably one that's out there. Yes, he did. So no, don't remove that. I need to go back to this. Okay. All right. So, like I said, that was kind of an argument there. He is one of the ones that did mention bringing up, let's see here. Play Lasers and Feelings, game which dice provided pivotal results, bare bones, nothing I'd play often, but I wouldn't go so far as to say as it's lazy or worthless BX clone. That's another thing. It's like, some people got a little irritated that a lot of BX clones and stuff like that or BX derived games were listed I believe they were listed in level 3. But that's because they don't add anything to the table. I hate to say it, Castles and Crusades is great. Tunnel, all these, BX clones essentially out there. Or let's take a white box from the Basic Expert. It's the best BX clone out there. I mean, it is, or the best white box clone. It really is white box fixed. But does it really add or bring anything to the hobby? Does it really do anything for us? No, it doesn't. Because it's just the same thing rehashed in a better skin. And while it's great that it's going to provide an easier, more digestible way to play the original game for a bunch of new players, and it's really well done, it still doesn't deserve to be a 4, 5, 6, 7 level game because he didn't do anything except for clean up what somebody else did. Nothing new was added to the hobby or to the scene by that product. Fantastic product. I'll never buy it because I have personal issues with TBE, but I would never discourage anybody from buying it, and I literally essentially just plugged it for him because it is an extremely well-crafted product. And if I were going to play white box D&D and didn't have any other access, that would be where if I didn't have that personal hang up with him, that's where I'd go before I'd even go to try and find the original. But it's still just, down there in the level 3 because it's not anything that is that's up there. Yes, it did. White Box did integrate the chainmail style combat, but the one thing to keep in mind, and this is part of the reason why I did not have why I did not list OD&D as the level 7 version of Dungeons and Dragons. I used AD&D 1. The way I see it, and if you look at it objectively without any of your rose-colored glasses on, or your nostalgia goggles, or your need to defend the OSR, original Dungeons and Dragons is an incomplete product. It is a halfway bastard child between wargaming or single adventure gaming and an RPG. It really is. There's a lot of holes that need to be patched, and chainmail is an effective patch for some of it. So by him doing that, he basically finished White Box and then put it out. And he, got to use decades of history of people doing these things to make that work. But that's actually why I put AD&D in level 7, is because to me, that's the first time we truly had a complete game in the new genre. Mercurius, my friend, I appreciate it. Giving out a membership. That is fantastic. Thank you very much. See, you feel like when people get their identity wrapped in what they love, hence the defensive tone. Yes, you are absolutely 100% correct. I do run afoul of both sides quite a bit in some of these videos and comments, because I do everything I can to be objective. And when I don't think I can be, or I don't think I can be effectively, I go out and I say it in some of these videos, like in this one in particular, or actually in the GM video. I literally started the video by saying, as a narrative style game master myself, as a Hickman Revolution GM, there is going to be some bias that I put in here, but here's why I think that some of that bias is actually justified. It's very hard for people to step away from their biases. So let's go on over here. This is one comment right here that I think was definitely important. I don't know who Violet Deliriums is. She has a channel of her own. She popped in to say this and then never responded, never replied. She was never subbed or anything. So one of those wonderful comments. But she goes, what you are trying to say with this ranked categorization system, and from what level of authority are you attempting to speak? So what am I trying to say, and from what level of authority do I speak? Let's take, for example, category 5. Suddenly we jump from what I think is good versus bad level to some sort of consumer capitalist branding emphasis, which has nothing to do with the quality of the game itself. Then we go back to actual game quality. And regarding the why do you think this ranking is appropriate? Who are you to try to influence in this video? Why, your opinion on what makes games great or important to the larger gaming world. I wouldn't presume to tell someone else what they should like or not like. You are basically telling me the 5e and Shadow Dark are better than level 3 to 4 games I like, especially Dolem Wood. I call BS. This is a prime example of what you were just talking about. Prime example. There you go. Case and point. 100%. It is not about what you like, what I like. I even said it that she didn't pay close here. But it's not about that. It's about quality. It's not about even quality of the game in a lot of ways. It's about qualities of the game. Different things that the game brings to the table and does. You can have, basically, I even said it in the video, and I believe it says right here, is like, some of my own favorite games fall into some lower tiers. And that 1 and 2 are the only ones that are entirely based on outright mechanical quality. After that, you got copies all through. Like, there are fantastic games in level 3 and 4, but they're missing something. And it's not where one place that she really messed up is when she was talking about this consumer capitalism branding thing. Well, yes and no. It's not about the game made a lot of money. Draw Steel made a bunch of money. Daggerheart made a bunch of money. Neither one of them belongs in the true upper tiers. but there are genre defining brands. You take Dungeons and Dragons as the prime example. If I tell somebody on the street I'm going to play Dungeons and Dragons, they have a general idea of what I'm doing. If I tell them I'm going to play a tabletop role-playing game, they have to ask me what the hell that is. And that's because Dungeons and Dragons is far and away the most successful brand of TTRPG. And then within the space of TTRPGs, we have games like Call of Cthulhu, we have games like Traveler, we have games like Cyberpunk, in particular Cyberpunk 2020. We have games like Dungeons and Dragons. We have we have Vampire the Masquerade, even though you should say GURPS, but it's not GURPS. GURPS did not have the success that Vampire the Masquerade did even though it's the system. Vampire the Masquerade is the brand and game that everybody knows. If I tell you those things, we all understand what they are. So I don't care if they didn't sell a single book. If they were that good at presenting what they were selling with their name, then they had an identifiable, measurable change on the hobby. And it has nothing to do with what went into their bank account. And yes, there is absolutely nothing wrong with capitalism. As a matter of fact, there has never been anything in the history of mankind that has provided a higher quality of life or lifted more people out of destitution than capitalism. It is the least bad system that humans are capable of operating in. But, I went through it. It's like, who am I to, who am I? I'll tell you who I am. The guy who has the damn YouTube channel, who wrote the script, who decided to write the video. And who am I to influence? I'm somebody who has an opinion, and if you like it, then I can influence you one way or another. And if you don't, go watch somebody else. Jenny D can influence you. She's doing the same thing I'm doing, just to a lot more people with a lot less actual intellectual depth behind it. But you have to say market success is at least some measure in some ways. But going right back to it, I think Daggerheart falls really low on the scale, and I think Candela Obscura also falls even lower. But I pointed it out in here to her. So it's not to convince anyone what game to play or avoid. It's simply to kind of categorize them in general terms. I love Cyberpunk Red, but it's a lower tier than D&D 5e because 5e is more complete, more polished, more robust, has a higher production quality, and undeniably has had a bigger impact on the hobby as a whole than Cyberpunk Red. And how much I personally enjoy Cyberpunk Red has nothing to do with that. So thus the game that I really like and love running and playing is ranked much lower than 5e would be because 5e did more. Now, so here is assuming for a moment that it's just British folklore OSE, that it doesn't warrant a level like a Shadow Dark that blended elements from modern games and focused on, I told her that I didn't recognize the game she was talking about, Dolmen Wood. And I said, assuming that it's just an OSE game, it doesn't warrant Shadow Dark because Shadow Dark did something more than a regular OSE game. It blended elements from both and brought it to a whole new thing and focused on torchlight mechanics. And it had a more definitive impact. And Pathfinder has no business being on higher levels because Pathfinder is nothing but clones of Dungeons and Dragons games with a fresh coat of paint on it. Regardless of how, regardless of how many books they sell. So, oh, look at that. Oh, Zen, here you are in my comment section telling me how awesome I am and how I did everything right. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Thank God it's too small for you to read what he actually said. There he is. I can sum it up. 3.5 versus PF one word modularity. Why I think it's better. Let's see here. I think there was another one on here that I thought was worthwhile. Yeah. Asked about Pendragons. Arian asked about Pendragon and where would it fall, and I said probably in the 4 to 5 level, which is probably right. I don't have enough experience to really definitively say it, but I think that's about where it probably should go. Oh man, I'm not a Taurus. See, here we go. bringing up the new stuff here. I'm Mr. Normie. I'm Mr. Tourist. Let's see here. Oh, in chat right there, gonna have to disagree with you here on AD&D. It was not first, and it was not created out of whole cloth. I'm clearly a descendant of OD&D. I played OD&D before and after it came out, so on and so forth. You know, AD&D is not just burst forth like Dionysus being pulled from Zeus's thigh. It's more like the birth of Athena that came out of Zeus's head after he ate her mother. And, you know, of course, I pointed out that both me and Gary Gygax would disagree on that one. And I think I explained that here a little bit earlier, that one of the big reasons that I see that OD&D is not the level 7 game is because I don't really feel it was complete. It's complete now. It's been completed, but you know, even Gary was bringing in other stuff, and Rob Kuntz was actually talking about that here recently, and saying, "Hey, we had to bring in other stuff to make this a complete game." I mean, that right there tells you it's like it wasn't quite there, and really, AD&D is what solidified the genre. It's really what created the genre was AD&D. And I can point to that too, because let's face it, he had a foothold. He started to sell books. He started to really make something. But Tracy Hickman dumped so much gasoline on that fire for AD&D that it really just blew it up. If I can do Mom and the War, Detective, TTRPG, any justice, it'll fall into 4 to 5. Too niche to go any higher, but I won't make it public if it's a pile of nonsense. Glad you put AD&D at the top of the list, as I think newer TTRPG players fail to realize that without it, their games probably wouldn't exist. There you go. Right there. Tom Johnson stepping up and saying, look, I understand that my game can't really get into the 6 or 7 level because what I'm doing is too niche. It's not going to be able to have that kind of impact, even if it's financially successful. And recognizing that without AD&D, there would be nothing else. And I say that with OD&D in mind. If we never had AD&D and everything stayed basic, we would not have the long surviving TTRPG hobby that we have. Let's see here, you know, Bruce Hubble coming in saying that they place the original in level 7. Numerous issues, had to homebrew like a madman to make it work, but it was the first commercially available, widely popular RPG. And that's where I say, you know, I really say that kind of in my opinion, the OD&D is way more of like an action adventure game. I took myself off the stage. Oh, I know what I did. It's way more of an action adventure game than it is what we would think of as a TTRPG. It just, in a lot of ways, it just is. Yeah. Well, and BX and BackMe are derivatives of OD&D. Basic, expert, and was it? I forgot what basic expert. I forgot what the CMI is. But yeah, I mean, you're right back there. So let's see here. Let me scroll through real quick, make sure we don't have any more great comments here before we move on to players. Yes, definitely living in the shadow or standing on the shoulders of AD&D. That's just kind of all there is to it. Isn't as dumb as it sounds, but if AD&D hadn't been published, someone would have invented it. Possibly. Somebody would have had to recognize that market opportunity existed. They would have had to thought along those lines, Gary Gygax, in a lot of ways, he's an example of all the right pieces coming together at the right time. So he had the wargaming background. He had the love of fantasy as a genre. He had the knowledge to it. He had the history of working on, I forgot who he worked with, but the history of working on game design. He basically had all the pieces in one place and made something he wanted to play. So in a way that it's almost like a perfect storm. I'm not saying it never would have happened with anybody else, and I'm not saying that it wouldn't have eventually fallen into somebody else's lap. If we want to use a D&D theme here, you can think of it in the way that Dragonlance talks about time. It's a river. You can change little details, but you're not going to change the overall flow. By going back and doing something, it's going to find a way to happen the way it's supposed to happen, no matter who's involved. And you can kind of look at it in that way. There would eventually be that person where it all kind of came together. But at the same time, Gary had a unique set of circumstances that really led to that happening. And even with AD&D, if he hadn't had the brawling fallout with Dave Arneson and some of that stuff, AD&D wouldn't be what it is. A lot of what codified AD&D and forced it to be hammered out and ironed out in certain ways was he needed to make sure it was legally distinct so he could screw over Dave Arneson. I mean, because if it was too much like his original idea, then Dave Arneson would have won even more than he already won. Is that Appendix N in the background? There's probably a good bit of Appendix N, and to be perfectly honest, there is a lot of stuff that is way better than Appendix N back there. On that bookshelf, there's a lot of stuff there. That's between these two bookshelves. I'd say that's probably somewhere between a quarter and an eighth of my overall library. But got some great stuff back there. I got the Time Wizards and Witches and Magic series, which is great. Belgariad's down there. Lord of the Rings first and second editions, and the Silmarillion, Tolkien Reader, Guide to Middle Earth, all that stuff. You've got the Deathgate Cycle, Dragonlance, all the McCaffrey books from Pern. Let's see what else is over there. Elvenborn, Shannara series, Earthsea, all the classics over there. The David Gemmell series for the Draenei Saga is over there, which is fantastic if you haven't read it. Bernard Cromwell's Warlords Chronicles, a lot of good stuff over there. Let's see here. Greg Lewis told me that if his vision for Dragon Slayer was if Gary Harnix had never had a falling out. Maybe so. Maybe his vision. I wonder if it was successful. Okay, so let's play with. Go here and let's play with the 7 levels of player. Let's see here. Let's zoom in just a little bit more. Mainly what I had here in these comments was a lot of good people popping in, trying to place themselves and doing the very good thing of not putting themselves into, I'm level 7. Of course, I'm level 7. Now, there is a lot of this with a shift between 4 and 5 and 3 and 4 and 5 and all that stuff. These are all generalities. There's going to be, and this was one of those things where I said I had kind of made a mistake, where in a lot of ways I goofed up with some of the examples because it would make it sound like certain character or certain player behaviors belong exclusively to like level 3. Oh, I'm level 5, but I do some of that stuff that's in level 3. And while you're going to have some of that for sure, because like I said, largely it's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and then 7 by itself. The long and short of it is that a lot of it is the degree to which you are effective in some of those behaviors. So I might have used something as an example and say level 3 for a level 3 player that makes sense in level 5, but it's made up for by something else. Like, oh, I'm not so great at taking notes, but that's okay. I'm so enraptured in the story, I don't really need to take notes. I've got it all locked up. So my note taking ability really doesn't matter. It doesn't like bump you down levels just because you say can't take notes. But what does bump you down levels is things like you don't take notes and you make no effort to really follow the story, or you're constantly forgetting, or that sort of thing. Let's see here. Anthony Bernard. Sorry in advance for the long one. I've never gotten to play a TTRPG, but I think I would be level 4, level 5 at best, with 1 or 2 aspects of 6 or 7, but sadly still retaining traits from the lower levels. Exactly what I was just saying. You're going to have different levels of those traits throughout. The difference between level 5 and level 3 is the bad things are minimized in level 5 and highlighted in level 3, and the good things are maximized in level 5 and they're downplayed in level 3. So, but they're still present. Level 6, I'd try to make my character's race, class, backstory, etc., fill in whole roles and synergies with the party and fit to the rest of the GM world. From level 7, I have a tendency to be ready from the jump and verify if I or other people be late, unable to make it. I'd certainly bring up rules, rulings, mechanics, and other things to add depth. When it comes to lower levels, these are things that I cannot control even in normal life. My biggest level 3 traits are distractions and no note taking. Always been easily distracted, even during serious moments. Most of the time, usually I'm annoyed or worried by something, can't hold focus. And if I am focused, I become hyper-focused because of my agitation, which leads me to missing important details. So this is being human and having different things. It's how much does this affect your gameplay and how good are you at it? If you're thinking these are the things that most heavily define me, and some are, listed as like what would be 6 and 7 traits, and some are like 2 and 3 traits, you probably average out to like a level 4. Mainly when you look at level 1 and 2, level 1 and 2 are basically players that detract from the campaign and detract from the game. They are actively bad. Levels 3 and 4 fill a seat, don't screw anything up, and they roll dice and they help with challenges, and they may help with the food bill, and they're generally people you want to be around, even though if they're not the quote unquote best players, right? When you get to the 5 and 6 level players, these are ones that actively improve your game. They're the players you need to have to drive the game forward. If you don't have at least 1 or 2 players in the 5 or 6, it's really hard for you to truly run a good campaign, right? Because if you don't have the people who can do that, what you're not getting is the people who are, what you're not getting from doing that is the players who are pushing the story. So as a brief aside here, let's talk about your Bro SR level. Your Bro SR, the true people who are obsessed with no prep and the idea of purely emergent storytelling, right? Absolutely no GM storyline whatsoever. We don't have hooks. We don't interfere at all with the player agency. Every single person that's in this chat has had players at their game that they use their player agency to sit there and stare at you and ask you what they need to do next. We've all had it. Those are level 3, level 4 players. They're there. They want to play. They're engaged. They follow the rules. They got their character there. They swing their sword at the dragon, but they're not doing anything to drive any kind of story forward. There is no emergent story because they're waiting to be shown the path. Level 5 and 6 players are the kind that can guide you into that. They can guide the other players into that. They help very much in game. They help drive the game forward. And they help with the internal world building aspects of the GM. What makes level 7 is essentially a co-GM. That's somebody who is in game and out of game, helping you run things and helping things stay smoother and really adding to it and coming to you and saying, how can I assist in guiding more? And they're rare. Like level 7 players are going to be very rare. And even level 5 and 6 are not the most common. Let's see here. Guy who lies about the spells he prepared. Yes. Guy who lies. Cheaters definitely are down there because they destroy your game. They just do. And when I say cheaters, like the only person you really ever cheat in one of these games is yourself. Let's see. Level 6 sometimes really shine to be a level 7. Most often I'm hosting and running games. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to sit here and like toot my own horn or toot the horns of all us other forever game master type folks. At the end of the day, game masters tend to be the higher level players because you just have to have a higher level of investment to be a good dungeon master. Being a dungeon master requires a higher level of investment. That's all there is to it. And because it requires a higher level of investment, that means that you just have to, you're going to be a higher level player by default, really. Dan, what's up, man? Welcome to the chat. Let's see here. 5, maybe a 6, too introverted, but and I'm also normally the game master. Once again, 5, 6. I'm a GM. I did like this from base D&D. I'm not a rules lawyer. I'm a mechanical engineer. That one definitely stuck with me. Old John of the Ozarks, one of my great patrons over there on Patreon. 1s and 2s, while deplorable, do not vex me as much as the 3s. 3s have potential and hope for them, but they often disappoint, and it's frustrating. You can write off 1s and 2s, but the 3s can be so much more. And I'd replied that 3s are possibly the most dangerous because they aren't people that everyone agrees need to go, but slowly over time they can erode the foundation. The big difference there is that your level 3s, they can easily become 4s and 5s, given the right guidance and given the right situation. They really can. And let's see. Let's check some chat over here real quick. All those drama club live plays must be level 1 because they're constantly trying to steal the limelight from each other. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily all level 1s. All right. I will put it to you this way. If they were an actual game, they probably would be level 1s. That is the biggest damage that those your live plays do to the hobby as a whole. If you're really just playing Dungeons and Dragons on camera or playing Cyberpunk or whatever on camera, it's pretty damn boring to watch. It's really something you need to participate in. But that's not what you're watching. You're watching people act like they're playing in order to facilitate a story. It's like, whose line is it anyway, basically? It's fantasy. Whose line is it anyway? Only they all know what's in the deck of prompts at the very beginning. And they have been given their direction on which way they need to go. And it's I'm going to say something political here real quick that is being used as an example. And there's definitely examples of this happening on both sides. So I don't want anybody to sit here and go ape shit crazy because I'm about to attack Barack Obama. Good old Barack Obama was able to be extraordinarily damaging to his political opponents while he was president, and was essentially Teflon. Like nothing stuck to him. You couldn't hit him with anything. And that's because Barack Obama, like we'll use the IRS scandal, for example. He never once went to his IRS directors and his IRS people and said, go target conservative nonprofit organizations and put a massive audit burden on them to drive them out of their ability to do what they're doing. He never once said that. He never said anything like that. What he did was he made sure that he put people in those positions who didn't have to be told what their marching orders were. They already knew they understood the assignment. He went to them and he said, hey, you're going to head my DOJ. He didn't have to say, go target my political opponents with research and investigations and stuff, try and dig up stuff on them. He didn't have to do that. They knew that's what they were being put in that position to do to start with, because he was a Chicago machine politician. That's what he was brought up under. And you can see that across the board. It's happened with Republican governors and presidents and stuff in the past. Abraham Lincoln, one of our greatest presidents, was a master politician. He was really very, very good at saying, oh, man, I'm going to put you in this position that makes you beholden to me because you're my political rival, and I've just neutered a rival by putting them in this position. And then I'm going to put another political rival in this position. I don't have to put you opposed to each other. Y'all are going to work against each other to do what I need to be done without me having to tell you. Okay? So that happened, right? You get that a lot here with those, like your Critical Role and your Dimension 20 and all that stuff. You put these players in effect, and they all understand the assignment. The assignment is to create this entertainment product. The assignment is to work together towards the narrative end goal. It's to accomplish whatever the story is. They don't have to be handed a script, and they don't have to be told what their character needs to do. They're going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, my character might actually really do this. Excuse me. Might actually really do this. This might be really what they're going to do if they were a real person. But I know that we need to complete this episode, and this is going to make a cool sellable moment that they can clip and they can show to advertisers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to do this instead, even though it's kind of out of character. Because they understand the assignment is not play D&D. The assignment is make a D&D entertainment product. Let's see here. If you know the effort it takes to run a game, you tend to be a better player because you want that effort rewarded for others. That is 1,000% correct. And it definitely kind of falls into what I'm saying here about, your DMs just tend to be higher. I think we've all kind of run across some 1s and 2s. Have we all come across 7s? Probably not. But your 1s and 2s, we've all run into them. Sometimes it's just somebody who you shouldn't know. Who's done this? Here's a question for you guys in chat. Who's done this? Have you ever had that friend that you really wanted to enjoy playing Dungeons and Dragons or Cyberpunk or Shadowrun or whatever with? You really wanted them to enjoy the game. You thought it really should be great for them. And so you basically bullied them into playing, and then it turned out that they were a pain in the ass to have at the table. You ever seen that? I think we've all done that. And we end up with a level 1 or 2 player, probably a level 2 in that case, mainly because it's our buddy and we like them and we get along with them, but they have no interest in being there at the gaming table. They're just there because we wouldn't shut up. Yes, choosing Seward was one of Lincoln's best moves. And the way he handled the Republican convention or the Republican committee was masterful to get the nomination in the first place. And once he kind of figured out what he needed to do, the way he managed some of his generals ended up getting better. They're really bad about that too. And the Emancipation Proclamation. Don't get it twisted. The Emancipation Proclamation was 100% a political power play, and it was masterful. It had nothing to do with freeing slaves. It really didn't. It had everything to do with making the war about slavery instead of the war being about preserving the Union, because by putting out the Emancipation Proclamation, he guaranteed that the European powers were not going to join the war or provide assistance to the South. More effective than any blockade. But he had to wait until he had Gettysburg to do it. He had to wait until he had a win. Because if he'd have done it then, McClellan probably would have pushed him out of office in the election, because it was not popular. There was actually mass desertion in the North after he did the Emancipation Proclamation. But masterful political move. Let's see here. I think that's about what we've got here for players. We're going to move over to Game Masters here. Let me add myself back in over here. I'm just I'm doing all the great stuff here with StreamYard, just goofing off, not doing anything right. Let's see here. We need 7 levels of Dungeon Mastereo. Let's add to the stage. Yeah, they ain't gonna read that. Oop, here we go. All right, so the 7 levels Dungeon Master may have been one of the easier ones to do here. A, because we're talking about one person, and B, because I'd kind of started to settle into my rhythm and figure out how I like to put these together. Let's go on down our list here. Never heard of any players complaining. Always try to make them live their character as best can. 6, maybe pushing 7. If I sit down 5+ year campaign, but my personal best was only 3 years. Campaign length is largely overrated in terms of success. I mean, yes, you're going to have a certain measure of skill as a game master to keep a group together and cohesive and to run like a 7 or 8 year campaign. Be like Double D over there with his now 30-year long running Birthright campaign. But at the end of the day, if the campaign runs to completion or the campaign gets to a satisfying end, it's successful. I don't care if it's a 1-year campaign or a 5-year campaign. Let's see. This is honestly one of the most practical descriptions of GM levels. Very clear at each stage how play works, just like the relationship with the rules. Level 1 and 2 break and fight the rules for selfish reasons. 3 and 4 struggle with the rules. 5 and 6 have strong knowledge, and 7 has rules that work for the campaign. Finally, someone else sees that Matt Mercer is just a decent game master. Given what I've seen, he is at level 5. The second campaign really showed that he is not prepared for the actions of the players and let them get away with too much. His main strength is just spending a lot of time between session 0 and session 1, building a 5x5 campaign guideline. And Mr. Mulligan is clearly a squirrel chaser that really gets into the chase. And he has so many bad practices, some of the worst world building. I do have to commend old Grognard Nightmares here. He really kind of, without being told, hit on that. Notice how he says it. Level 1 and 2 basically can't run their own game and are self-absorbed. Level 3 and 4 struggle with the rules but are trying to do what's there and make mistakes a lot of times because they try to rush through things. 5 and 6 have gotten to where they're super comfortable with it. Level 7 knows how to make those rules work for themselves. You see that 2, 2, 2, and then level 7 structure. Let's go ahead and skip to that real quick down here, because I actually have some disagreements with myself. Where is my pinned comment? Because in my pinned comment, I had right here some controversial examples. Open to have my mind changed. I even changed my own mind, but based on best guesses with no real experience playing with any of these people I put out, I said that Ron Edwards and half of the WotC staff would be level 1. Pointy Hat and the other half of the WotC staff would be level 2. I put Jenny D in 3, Condor XP to level 3, and the Dungeon Dudes in level 4. Brendan Mulligan and Bob Worldbuilder in level 5. Matt Mercer and Fantasy Forge in 6, Double D, RPG Pundit, Atten from We Love TTRPGs, and Professor DM up in level 7. Honestly, I'm kind of thinking back on this. I would probably drop Brendan Mulligan to like 3 or 4. Maybe even all the way to 2. Because I don't have a ton. It's really hard when you talk about it. It's really hard with anybody you haven't played with. Okay, let's start with that. If you haven't played with somebody, it's really tough because you really don't know. And when all you can go off of is these let's plays and live plays and convention streams and events and stuff, there's so much exterior nonsense going on that it interferes. And there's also the ability to edit later if you're watching afterwards, which doesn't quite help out. And then you're almost always seeing them playing with a group that has a cohesive idea and has a uniform mission, which is going to help them a lot. And Brendan Mulligan, from what I've been able to see with Dimension, he's more of a gimmick game master than anything else. And from what little Critical Role I've looked into after he started DMing, and this was actually I forgot who pointed it out, that during the episode 2 of the new campaign, that Matt Mercer looked kind of pissed at Brendan Mulligan. It makes sense because the guy's awful. And you can tell that basically you took a fine-tuned race car that cranks out money and you put it in the hands of somebody who doesn't know what he's doing, and now he's wrecking on turn 1 and turn 2. Or he's going through it and he's squealing tires and he's shaving off time and tearing up the suspension. And in the end, you're going to have a slower lap and a torn up race car that needs a ton of money worth of repairs. Because Brendan Mulligan is really not good. I would honestly bump him down to like a 3 or maybe even a 2. Bob Worldbuilder, I'll leave him at 5 because he may possibly be a 6 or a 7. I don't know because I've never seen him as a GM. But just going off of some of the stuff he talks about and says, and some of the other things I've seen about him, I want to say he's actually more like a level 4 game master. But I don't want to, I wanted to give him more the benefit of the doubt there. All right, Dad and son, I would love to know where you rank too, but I've never played with you and I've never seen you DM, so I don't know how I would really be able to do that. You might actually be a better judge than me. I think one of the ones that, and I'm actually kind of surprised that I didn't get any push on this at all, that I have Condor DM so far up. And because the guy is such an unmitigated ass that I can't imagine ever wanting to be in a room with him, especially not when he's ostensibly in control. But if you actually listen to him, if you can dig through all the garbage that he has and get past him saying really stupid shit like, Harmony Ginger doesn't know what she's talking about, little girl, no experience, that experiences everything. And you can get past his nonsense where he's, basically all of his opinions are facts and they're all extreme facts, and any deviation means you're garbage and trash and terrible. Like my very first reaction video was that that Condor DM thinks you're an idiot, even if you agree with him 99% of the time. It has to be 100%. Okay, I might have to check that out there. You can drop a link if you want to. I don't think I have it blocked for y'all to put that stuff in. So by all means, drop a link in the description, and everybody who is here needs to hit my like button and then hit his link after we're done. But let's see here. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. But Condor, if you can actually filter through all his crap and listen and get to some of his actual meat and potatoes gaming opinions, particularly about second edition D&D, he does have a knowledge base, and he does have a few things in there that point to him having some level of skill as a dungeon master. I don't know how much that's polluted by his complete garbage attitude and his total lack of charisma, but that's why I have him up there. I think he's at least level 4, and he may actually be higher. But I'm actually surprised nobody jumped in and pushed back against that, because you'd think a lot of people would be like, he has to be trash. And then, of course, like I said, Jenny D, I think she's level 3 at best. Because Jenny D, I mean, when you start talking about like, oh, Game Master burnout after like 5 and 6 sessions, it's like you've been playing 6 months and you got, which, 6 months if you play every single week, you're, what would that be? Wow, my brain just went totally to sleep. And you're like 36 sessions in or some nonsense like that. And or 26 sessions in, and you got burnout. Oh, you're so stressed. So it's like, this is somebody who is not, yeah, there you go, 24. You're talking about somebody who is not actually gaming on a high level. Right? I went with 24. I went with 26 because I just divided 52 weeks in the year by 2. But to me, that means she has to be making some of those mistakes that would put her in level 3. But I will say this about old generic Jenny D. I do think for all the, we're not going to call them nefarious, but all the self-serving reasons that she got into being a YouTube person or whatever, for all that stuff, for everything you can say about her, and for all the overblown nonsense and the narcissism that's associated with her, I do think that she has actively tried to be better at it. I think she maybe saw an avenue to make herself famous, to make herself money, to make herself, be a 10 in a sea of 6s, and doing what she needed to do. But I think she accidentally stumbled on something she does actually enjoy and put some effort into. Pointy Hat is just such a preachy douche wagon that he's going to be toxic to his campaigns unless you just have a group of people who just do the same kind of self-masturbatory nonsense. But I don't know. And I'd say that's one that I'd be open to hear if anybody thinks that some of those ought to be moved for one reason to another. Yeah. Selling the calendar. Get them never touched a booby calendars. Let's see here. Dude, so when someone says world building, what level are they? Worlds are forged, not built. I really hate that crap. I really do. There is a difference between world building and like there's different types of world building out there. World building is not just building a design and designing a world, putting in maps and writing a history and stuff. World building can be done collectively, but it's done at, there's a foreman. You got a construction crew, there's a guy who's in charge. When I say this guy's a home builder, I'm not saying that he is driving every single nail, pouring every inch of concrete, pulling every wire, and fitting every pipe. But this is another example of where the terminology hooked a bunch of people, because I said that a level 7 game master is a world builder. It's not so much about the creating of cultures and maps and religions, but through the way they run the world, a world gets built around them, and not even just a world like a game world, right? So I'm not saying they're a world builder in the fact that, oh man, they created this really cool fantasy world. They're like Tolkien, or they really created this idea for us. When I say they're a world builder, I mean that when you play with them, the world gets built around you, right? You feel the world being built. So you're inside of it. When you play with that game master, because of the way he moves things, because of the way he sets things up, because of the way he controls pace, because of the way he directs players and guides them, and the way he responds to their use of agency and that sort of thing, that he helps, like he uses players as tools to help create a living and breathing world, regardless of what that world may be. You can be a world builder GM and build a world out of a module. And if you want proof of that you can really throw in the face of some of the OSR diehards. Keep on the Borderlands, Village of Hamlet, not a lot there. But it gives you everything you need to run entire campaigns out of both of them. You can build entire worlds out of the Keep on the Borderlands module. And we see them do it, and they brag about it all the time, about all the great games and great campaigns they've had from Keep on the Borderlands. Yes, congratulations, World Builder GM, if you're good enough to get that to happen. But they get hung up on the thing, and when they hear World Builder, they think guy who has 15 notebooks of backstory and history and stuff, and a story that's already set in stone to put their character on the rails with, right? Let's see here. Yes, watching D&D combat is indeed boring as hell, and anytime they have a shopping episode, click the hell out immediately. Half the time I check the hell out of shopping in game. I won't even do shopping sessions when I DM my characters have to figure that shit out between sessions. If I'm a player in a game and a shopping session manifests, I bounce. I mean, now there can be stuff that's where your world builder GM comes in. Great for you to highlight that. Your world builder GM, for the players that are there, can make things happen in those downtime sessions, or shopping session as we would call them, and turn them into something that is actually worth participating in. Okay? You really can. Here you go. Truer words were never spoken. It speaks for itself. But yes, that's the difference between a world builder GM and like a level 4, level 5 GM. Is when you got Brendan Lee Mulligan, or you've got Matt Mercer doing a shopping session, there's not really much there, and it's boring and it's irritating. When you are sitting down with a level 7 GM, all of a sudden the shopping session is what leads into what some people would call a side quest, but leads into something that unravels into fleshes out a new story, or fleshes out a new part of the city. Like, when I say world building and I say that it's about the world being built around you, and yes, the players are involved in that as a tool. You go on your shopping session, something happens that leads you into a part of town that hasn't been quote unquote built yet. And the next thing you know, we're building out the culture of the underbelly of the docks or whatever in this seaside town. And all of that came from the shopping session. But that is not easy to do. And it's definitely not easy to do without feeling like you're trying to shove somebody down a path to get them to stop doing referring to the shopping session, where someone's going to go sit with the PHB open in front of them trying to decide what to spend their gold on. I will say this, that doesn't happen in at my games. And there's a reason that doesn't happen in my games, because there is no shop. I tell people very quickly, I'm like, what the player's handbook says is a suggestion to me on what the value should be. But we live in the real world, and markets determine what things happen. So you don't need to look in the player's handbook for an item. You can ask me if it's available. You can use gather information to try and find it, to see if it's there in town. Me, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, what's the likelihood of it being here? And it's like, man, why am I having to spend so much coin or do a quest or something to get this mundane item? Well, you're in a town of 200 people, and it's the only one they've got, and the whole village had to save up to buy it. So
Yeah, in the big city, it's whatever this item is isn't all that big a deal, but where you are, it is a big deal. Trying to buy the farmer's only plow is going to be way more expensive and way harder to make happen than it is going to the blacksmith in the next big town and having him get you a plow. You'll get a better plow for less money. But, right there. Downtime sessions, totally fine with those. Those are great. They lead to RP opportunities, world development hooks, etc. Exactly what I'm sitting here talking about. Homebrew world doesn't even have currencies or an economy based on exchange of coin, good, and services. Developed a monster part crafting system for the players, which they love. Yeah, great things to do. I've actually gone down that rabbit hole and made myself have tons of headaches in the past before. I'm an economist by nature. I've studied economics in college. I work in finance, and I am I'm an economics nerd. I have made entire market economy systems and whatnot using like trademarks and stuff that are for exchange for services with certain trade guilds and stuff instead of gold coins, and built entire financial systems for worlds. And it almost always just ends up getting reverted back to gold because hammering through my player's head how exchange rates and stuff work just turns into me doing accounting for my entire party for half a session. Yeah. I do like this one right here. Bag of marbles, a sort of magic can create perfect spheres out of glass or metal. That is the best argument in the world against the combat wheelchair. Because if you are in a world that has sufficient magic to create the ball bearings needed to make a wheelchair in the way we think about it, then you have the magic to make them not necessary, and they would have never been invented. And if you don't, and you live in the kind of world where that kind of magic doesn't have accessibility, where the hell are you getting the ball bearings to make a wheelchair that can do the kind of things that would be necessary? Because otherwise, you just got a straight axle with some wagon wheels on it, and your wheelchair-bound adventurer is now moving it is now having to make strength checks to move 5 feet on a dirt road. So, oh, let's see here. An Austrian school guy. Awesome. It's the only school that matters. I do like the boys from Chicago, though. Echo, no, you were trying way too hard with that one, man. You're trying way too hard there. Ball bearings don't fucking exist. No, they don't. There are no ball bearings. Let's get back to some of these comments here. Huge fan of Rule of Cool within the session. Like I said, you see a lot of this in the GM video here, where people get weighed down on what's in there. Like down here, like where the author has to tell his own story to build a framework. When I was talking about the storyteller game master down there in the lower levels, it's more about like right here in my thing. Level 2 is not just the GM has a story. It's that the game master's story is alpha, omega, foremost, and highest. A narrative GM, I'm a Hickman Revolution game master, so I put people like Tracy Hickman up in level 7, and they damn sure have stories when they start. But ironically, Hickman was involved tangentially in one of the worst level 2 adventures of all time. Dragons of Flame is absolutely horrendous. But the fact of the matter is that people need to understand the difference between a linear storyline in a real world and a railroad. Railroad forces you to do things. It makes things where the only option is the one the GM wants you to take. Yes, it does. It is horrible. Dragons of Despair, not so bad. Dragons of Flame, one of the worst railroads ever. A railroad is when you start robbing the agency. Here's the thing. You want to talk about just extreme egotism from the players. You are a level 1 party of adventurers. And we'll just assume you're playing Terrill, you're playing in the Forgotten Realms. When you talk about Forgotten Realms, I mean, the janitor is a level 1 character. I mean, in my world, level 1 character is the equivalent of like an Olympic medalist. You're pretty elite even at level 1. But even if you're in my world and like at level 1, you're pretty elite compared to the average person. Line up all the Olympic medalists and tell me how many of them's decisions influence the world in a big way. I mean, you got Jesse Owens. He made a big impact. Trying to think of some of the some other Olympians that made really big impacts just from their skill there. The fact of the matter is that it's like the world is going to move forward around these players regardless of what they do. And as a game master, if you are putting things in place where it makes sense for them to follow a certain linear story path, you're not forcing them to follow it, but it does make the most sense. That happens in real life too. Every day we walk out the door, we have our very own D&D campaign when we walk into work and we have decisions to make, and we follow the linear path that leads to a paycheck as opposed to all the other options that lead to no job and the bread line. Okay, so the issue comes into, like I said, it's a form of the self-obsessed, toxic player agency problem that we have out there, that these players are mad and think it's a railroad when the world is moving in a direction and their decisions don't just change the momentum of the entire society around them. Like, literally, this is the level of narcissism we're talking about. Every single one of these character players, every one of these PC players that's like that are hardcore bitching about railroad anytime a linear storyline comes up. It's like, you think your character is Jesus Christ, the man with the power to reshape the entire face of the planet and split time. And I'm not talking from the religious side of things here. I'm talking about from the existence on the planet side of things. No person has had more impact on the world quicker than Jesus Christ. I mean, Napoleon's on up there. And you seem to think your character is Napoleon Christ. It's ridiculous. Let's see here. 3+7. Homebrew, 80% of the world, mechanic systems, etc. have multiple locations, NPC, and all these pieces. No clear idea where they fit together. Once again, yeah, you could definitely have that just because you don't have a clear idea where they fit together. As long as you can make them fit in a way that runs a serious world, you're there. And right there, 7 + 3 divided by 2 = 5, bro. That's always something I like to see there. Starting off this video, knowing where I'm going to see where I've been lacking. I'm like, hey, if I can help somebody learn or improve their game, then I've done my job. If I can improve somebody's day in just a little bit by posting, hey, I've done what I've set out to do. I mean, some of these are just, people having story time. Nice exercise, but I don't think it's possible to rank GMs on a one-dimensional scale. I mean, that's kind of funny right there when we're talking about linear stories. It's not one-dimensional simply because it's linear. Clearly, we could spend hours fleshing out the whole concept because generalities are a thing and they exist for a reason and they're very useful. But the simple fact of the matter is that you got to rank them some way. And this falls into the category of trying to lump every example and there's, you said storytelling down here at level 2. So, I tell stories and clearly, I'm better than that because I have all these level 5 and level 6, whatever adventures, so I got these level 5 and 6 traits. So how do I fall in here? So it's like, because it's an example of, maybe you don't like the name, but you're reading too much into it. You're taking, like, when I say this is the storyteller, or this is the author, you're taking it to mean any game master who has any kind of story written. And that's not what it means. So let's see here. Let's pop on over here to the stream comments, see what we got here. Make sure, okay, no supers or membership gifts or anything like that. So let's just go into our regular comments. Let's see here. GM has to create a story. Coming across an ambush caravan is basically the PCs entering the middle of a pre-existing story. It absolutely 100% is. It absolutely is. The Bro SR fallacy of the GM, who is essentially just an algorithm running the game for players, is just idiotic. But and here's the thing: they don't actually run their games that way. They don't, because their players have fun, and their GMs don't just quit because they're essentially the math crunching in the background of the video game. And because even if you're playing like a true like dungeon crawl Diablo style adventure game, you're still going to have some story in there. You're going to have the characters have life to them, and you're going to have realistic reactions, I hope, to whatever's encountered. Even an orc has an 8 intelligence. That's not just a number on the page. Not mainly for his athletics. He had influence, all right. But even then, it's like, how much influence? I mean, can you tell me what Bruce Jenner did the other day? I can't. I can't tell you, but I probably can't tell you a damn thing he said in years. You are naming your next character Napoleon Christ. You're going to get some looks. I have a feeling your game master's probably going to pay extra scrutiny to anything you do. Mentoring a 5EDM. I had to check a PC with main character syndrome. Told him to maintain vigilance after. Yes, that is a good thing. Main character syndrome is devastating. That is where books are dangerous. You want to talk about the danger of Appendix N? The danger of Appendix N is there are main characters in every single book in Appendix N. There are focal point main characters. Most of them are not. Even the ones that have groups, there's still 1 or 2 that are the really main focal characters. And that can be bred into your players quite a bit, because they have to understand that the group is the main character. Sometimes. To turn main character syndrome, main dead character syndrome. Well, I mean, you don't want to just like off them, because that can be just as bad as their behavior. Now that's going to depend on how bad the behavior is and how much it happens. A lot of times it's more fun to just backbench them constantly and watch them freak out because they're being backbenched over and over. So you're going to try and make yourself main character, then you're already doing it. So I don't need to do it for you. I need to run a game for you. I mean, I'll run a game for just about anybody. The only question is what are we doing and where are we doing it? As I've said before, good D&D play at the table makes for a terrible stream. Black Jesus Dynamite. Story gives the why for the monster killing. It sure does. Hey, look at that. Just in case people didn't know us, you got my real world best friend who popped up in stream. What's going on, Bobs? Just try not to do stupid shit. Yeah, that's about the truth. Fun story, since he happens to be here in chat. He had a habit at times of being the depending on what day you caught him and how shitty work was, he could be one of them level 2 players who was like half-ass not paying attention. But he more than made up for it every single time because he was also the one who made everybody at the table laugh every time he turned around. And we had one time I did a Sky Pirate campaign, and we had flying boats, flying ships, and his character was Captain picked he was the Sky Captain who had the boat, and they literally flew up into the clouds to essentially the higher planes, going to speak to a god about their grand mission. I mean, and it's pretty high level. I mean, you don't have a flying boat at level 2. And I'm sitting here doing all my world describing and all that kind of stuff like that. And I'm talking about these gigantic doors. They're like the pearly gates. They're platinum and they're, traced in gold and have flawless gems in them and all this stuff. And he's just sitting there over there grim, and I'm asking them what they're doing as the doors are open. And this sumbitch is sitting on the floor in front of the coffee table. And he's been fooling around with something under the table the whole time. Just, like a fidget spinner, basically, just goofing off under the table, messing with something. And what I didn't realize was what he was messing with was a battery-powered screw gun. So basically like a cordless screwdriver. And I'm asking everybody what they're doing with these gigantic gold and platinum doors. And this sumbitch just sits back. He doesn't say a word. He just reaches up and starts using the screw gun and turning it on, and then reaches over like this and starts doing like he's dragging. And it's like, seriously? So this is what your character's doing. Your character is literally pulling out a screw gun, taking out the hinges, and stealing the gates of heaven because they're worth money. And I was like, this is the most PC crap you've ever heard of in your life. Whole story is derailed because he needs to steal the pearly gates. But yes, that was fantastic. I thought it was hilarious. So did everybody else. And that is only one of many things that happened with that gentleman. So kudos to old Bobby down there. What part of pirate did I not understand? I mean, yeah, I guess I should have known better. There you go. Becomes the party torchbearer or door holder. Hey, how about there? Yes, he became the door holder, all right, quite literally, with his damn screw gun. Let's see here. And I need to run a game for Napoleon Christ and Jesus Bonaparte. I mean, hell, why not make that happen? Let's see here. Did a 1E1 shot while traversing a dungeon. Hireling was bragging on the fact that he hazard pay to the other hirelings. Cleric told me that I need to stop the dangerous ideas. There you go. Isn't that the damn truth? If I knew better, I wouldn't be a DM. That's right. If we knew better, we would just be a player. We would just show up. We have our dice, character sheet, and book, and we just sit over there and we'd enjoy. We wouldn't beat our head against the wall trying to figure out why somebody decided to do something stupid. Why some idiot decided that his character needed to be a mute who communicated with a chalkboard when he knew full good and well that the rest of the party was going to steal that thing at some point. I mean, yeah, DMing is more fun. I do actually love that. Let's see here. Remember taking the main doors from a dungeon and casting levitate on them to bypass most of the traps in the dungeon. That is a very good use right there. I have had players take doors and surf downstairs with them to avoid that kind of thing. Yep. Famous redneck last words. Hey, y'all, watch this. Yes, we've seen that more than once. That's we've had plenty of great ideas that started with that phrase. Well, guys, we're hitting up on the 2-hour mark. So we've covered these videos here. I'm gonna what I'm gonna do with this is it's gonna be the first and the third Thursday of every month at 6 is when I'm going to do my live stream. we'll probably do a lot of comment diving, because Lord knows that we have a lot less productive comments that we could go through that would be humorous. Though this might turn into one of those streams where I'm just bashing people who commented on my on my videos. So because every now and then I say something that brings out some real morons in my comment section. I don't even know how that happens, but and I'm not talking about the people who disagree with me and have like discussions that actually matter. I'm just talking about the idiots. But yeah, we'll do this every couple of weeks. If I have somebody to talk to, I will bring them on and we'll do some interview type stuff and try and continue pushing forward. But I will, at the latest, see you guys back on Monday for the next intelligence as a dump stat. And that's if I don't get one of my alignment videos or something done between then. But I do believe that we are going to call it there. So you guys have a good one. See you next time.